And then, yeah. Okay. Hello, everybody joining us from far and near. I think we're just, if the people on the stream can let me know, actually, you know what, I'm gonna stop moving, but if the people on the stream can let me know if you can hear me okay, just type that into the stream, that would be lovely. Thank you. And we are just waiting for our last few people to come in the door. So what time is it now? 2:02, maybe around 2:05. So get yourself some water. Any notes from if they can hear us? No notes yet. All right, well. Yes, volume is good. Great. Wonderful. That's all we can ask for. Perfect. Okay. I said 2:05, but okay. And then just so you know, before we get going, I just put the images kind of like in line of how I thought they would go, but okay. You can feel free to push through. So I think I have one of yours first, and then I think it's the one with the pad first. Okay. Well, I know they both have pads, but then the other one second later on. Yeah. Or did you want that switched? Yeah. You can just like push through to wherever you need to go. That's totally fine. Okay. Yeah. Great. Okay. Are we all ready? Wonderful. Do I have Via down here too? She left. Okay, yes, we got you. Okay. Your little head peeking out from around the corner. Slightly louder? Okay, perfect. I can do that. I can do loud. Awesome. So thank you to all of our panelists for joining us today. Thank you to everybody here in person and also on our live stream. I'm so excited to have you all with us. Before we get into anything, I'd love to acknowledge first and foremost that CICA Vancouver is located within the shared unceded ancestral territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. This is something we take quite seriously, and we're extremely grateful to be here on their ancestral. CICA Vancouver is a relatively new nonprofit multidisciplinary arts organization. We've been here since about April 2022. And in that short period of time, we've been able to have 11 exhibitions featuring artists from all around the globe. So, of course, with the theme international and contemporary, that's really the start of our focus, but we also really focus here on education, community engagement, and international artistic exchange. So not only are we hoping to bring in international artists to connect to our community, but really actually connect with the community and have those conversations and enhance Vancouver on an international stage as well. So really grateful that we've got some really amazing local artists here with us today. And then this exhibition is by the artist Ángeles Agrela. She is a Spanish artist, and it's titled The Paradoxes of the Aura. So her work vary heavily, as all of you can see in person, but hopefully people online have been able to see as well, features hair as a major part of all of her current artworks. So her work really explores themes of how women have historically been portrayed in art, how women show their agency as well as their personalities, and trying to show that in the artwork. And she chooses to use hair as a way to kind of mask and conceal the faces, so that we're thinking about other ways in which women choose to show who they are in their identity aesthetically beyond just our outside looks, kind of the choice and the agency there, which is why we've decided that we should have this panel, because I think it's a great starting off point, but also I think we'd be remiss to not include alternative perspectives to other artists of different cultural backgrounds, not just Spanish, that use hair in their artwork, and for whom hair and agency and femininity is a major point of like source of inspiration, but also an important part to their identity and their artwork. So yeah, that's a little about us and myself. Sorry, I'm just on and on, but just getting this off the bat before we break into the actual fun conversation. Thanks, blah, blah, blah. So my name is Zoe Hartwick. I am an artist myself, as well as the Education and Community Engagement Coordinator here at the Center of International Contemporary Art. So my focus really is so much on education and accessibility in art. And yeah, I'm just so grateful to have this conversation. So thank you. And Via, you can still hear good in the back? Awesome. Okay, thank you. So to start off the panel, before we get into more specific questions, I'd like to give everybody a chance to introduce themselves and to talk a little bit about their practice before we get into the questions. And then at the end of the panel talk, around 3:30. So we've got an hour and a half of panel talk. Then we'll open it up to questions both online in the chat and in person. Great. So who would like to, anyone want to volunteer to start?
I can go since I have to use the mic?
It
Or
helps
is this
for the
okay?
people streaming.
Oh, okay.
But you can just put it there on your.
It's not on.
Oh, it's on. It's got green.
Oh, okay.
It just
Sorry.
doesn't project into the room.
Okay.
Oh, you were expecting like.
I was expecting my voice to be echoed. Okay, so I'm so grateful to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I'm Saghi Ehteshamzadeh. I'm from Iran. I moved to Vancouver 2 years ago, and I'm an interdisciplinary artist. My practice ranges from cinema, video art, photography, and recently I've been getting into sculptural work. We'll see how that goes. Um, in my work, I'm so focused on talking about like social justice and societal issues and issues like body positivity. I had a chance to display my multidisciplinary art project called A Journey Through Scoliosis, where I talk about similarities between curved bodies and nature and mental side effects of scoliosis in Penticton last year. And recently, I curated an exhibition called Women Life Freedom at North Van Arts, which focused on the women life freedom movement in Iran and the gender inequality women and all women. When I say women, I mean all women, all individuals who identify as women face. Yeah, internationally. Yeah, I think that's all about me.
Thank you so much.
Hi, I'm Karin Jones. I am biracial artist. I'm African and German, and a lot of my work has been about race and identity. And the thing that actually started me on that path with my work was hair. I had a coworker who was getting ready for a big event. She went next door to the salon, and she came back with twice as much hair as she had when she left. And and she told me, I was like, oh, what is that? And she told me that they were human hair extensions, and that these extensions came from women in India who go to a temple and give up their hair, and then the temple sells the hair for beauty products in the Western world. And she presented this, and I guess her hairdresser had presented this as a story that said, you're participating in a spiritual practice by doing this because you're supporting the temple. And so, and I was like, it doesn't really sound right. Like there must be a darker meaning to this story, and there must be more going on than that. And so I started researching it, and then when I started realizing how many Black women are consuming that hair, it's like, oh, of course, like it's been a long time that Black women have been doing all kinds of things to fit in with Western beauty ideals, not liking their curly, tight curled hair and covering it up with straight hair. So that is what really got me going on thinking about identity. And so while not all of my work is specifically about hair, that was sort of the starting point. And since then, I've done a Victorian dress out of synthetic hair extensions, out of braids. And I've worked with some, like, I did a series that was purely blonde hair extensions, human hair extensions. So because most of this hair comes from Asia, it's very likely that it's been bleached and processed to make it platinum blonde, which somehow is an ideal in our culture. And so, yeah, things like that. And I've also, I've done work with, because I started as a jeweler, some of my work is actually going back to Victorian hair jewelry and using hair in my jewelry. And yeah, and you'll see some images of my work as we discuss ourselves and our work.
Thank you. It's around. And for you, Kendall.
I'm going to put it here because I talk with my hands so much.
Feel that.
So we're just going to start off by doing that. Hello, hi, my name is Kendall Gender, or Kenneth Wise, in many other days besides today. I am a drag queen from Vancouver. I've been doing drag for about 10 years now, although it seems that I'm getting younger every single year, so that's really working out for me. I am probably best known for being on Canada's Drag Race a few years ago. And yeah, I feel like for me, drag and, you know, activism and visibility, they've always kind of come hand in hand. I think so much of the origins from drag, especially within the queer community, really drag performers were kind of at the face of a lot of adversity, and they were kind of the ones really, you know, pushing down the doors to try to get the movements across. And I've always really found that valuable in my own work, and just, I don't know, they always really came interlaced to me. So something that I started a few years ago was actually a show called Visible here in Vancouver, because I felt as a biracial person here in Vancouver that my identity and visibility, if you will, just wasn't really represented in the way that I wanted it to be within the drag community in specific. So I started this show to kind of highlight, you know, visible minorities and give them a space to create and express, and you know, we raise money and awareness around a variety of different issues. Yeah, and in relation to hair, obviously I am a, you know, feminine presenting drag queen, so hair for me is very obviously a huge part of my characterization, and I think it's really cool. Touching on the biracial aspect, I'm half black, half white. So for me, it's really cool to express my femininity in drag, in, you know, different hairstyles and textures and that kind of stuff that I didn't necessarily maybe get to express when I was a little queer boy growing up. So it's really cool to kind of, you know, experiment in that world. And for me, my character can kind of change depending on the hour, really. And the fun thing about that is that a lot of that has to do with my, you know, hair and makeup, and that's sort of how I express myself. So yeah, thanks for hanging out with us today, and it's gonna be fun.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for that little introduction. I'm going to pass this. Oops, sorry, I shouldn't touch the mic. Straight for the mic. Perfect. So I'm going to pass this off to Saghi as we get into our questions here. And is this an okay first slide, or do you want me to go to the other one?
Yeah, it's fine.
It's fine.
Honestly.
Okay.
They're all related
Okay.
somehow. Yeah.
Perfect. So, So, Saghi, Agrela has stated that by using hair as a tool to mask and obscure the faces of her subjects in the composition of her images, she's able to, quote, generate extra attention to the other kinds of personal characteristics that individuals consciously choose in creating their image. Those characteristics being their hair and their fashions. In regards to your current artistic and curatorial practice, what is your reaction to hearing such a quote? And how does your practice address this relationship between hair and agency?
I'm gonna start by saying a little bit of background about like how the hair situation is in my country and where I come from. So as many of you may know or may not, in Iran, the Islamic government has a rule for women that they have to cover their hair all the time when they're in public. And this rule actually starts when children get to the age of 9, girls. So from the age of 9, you're told that you have to cover your hair from basically everyone except for all other women or your father and your brother. So even your uncle, you have to cover your hair. So I feel like basically at the age of 9, you're taking away a big part of someone's identity, which is hair, as we just like spoke about how important it is in our like everyday style and like dressing up and going into character. Hair plays a big part. And when you're told from the age of 9 that you have to cover that, I feel like that's the start of taking away part of a person's agency by telling them to cover the hair, which is like just thinking of a 9-year-old, you would like to dress up and like, you know, glam up your hair as well. And you can't do that because like, even if you're going to a party where you can show your hair, you have to cover it when you go out. So I think it's like, it's definitely taking away part of like personal identity. And in my practice, I've been trying to address how this can impact one's mental health and like identity crisis, causing identity crisis. Because usually when you hide something, it's something wrong or something bad. Why do I have to hide a part of myself that is so natural, that is beautiful? Like a lot of people spend hours and a lot of money into getting their hair done. So why do I have to hide it? So I guess in my work, I have been trying to address like how this can be very impactful. And the artwork that you can see there, it's actually the ceremony that um, is held for children of age of 9 to celebrate wearing this hijab, the mandatory scarf that they have to. And it's called kind of made into this fun celebration that is actually not fun, because like you're forcing a child to cover a very natural part of their identity. And I think that is a traumatic experience itself. It's like you are telling a child that it is wrong for you to show hair. And this is still going on to the point that when the women life freedom started happening, movement started happening, like it again happened because part of Mahsa Amini's hair was showing. So that was why she was arrested and then murdered by the police. So I can say that like, yes, hair can give people agency. It is a big part of everyone's identity. It is part of everyone's nature, and it should be embraced rather than being forced to be covered.
Thank you so much for your perspective, and it's beautiful to hear you talk a little bit more about this artwork and like this like ceremonialization of shame that's kind of coming through behind as well.
Yeah, like the artwork talks about other thing as well. I'm not sure if I can go through that or not. It kind of talks about puberty as well. With you can see the menstruation pad there, because it's also like when you get your period, you shouldn't pray or you shouldn't touch the book because you are unclean. That's the rule that they teach you. And again, it's a part of your identity as a woman to get your period, and you're told that you're dirty or unclean. And I feel like that is also a very traumatic experience for someone who's going through puberty.
Absolutely. Like
Yeah.
puberty on itself
On its
is
own, it is
so
traumatic and
traumatic,
scary,
and
and then you don't need to add more scary things to it.
absolutely. Thank you. So I guess in continuing this conversation concerning hair and agency and choice, and the way that like shapes our identity, I'd love to dig a little bit deeper into your practice, Karin. In your artist statement for Worn, Shaping the Black Female Identity, which I will switch to here, from 2014 to 2015, which features a Victorian era mourning dress that you made from braided synthetic hair extensions. You stated, quote, "I wear my African Canadian identity much as a Victorian woman would have worn this type of dress, proudly, but also uncomfortably, shaped, but also constrained by it." I know your work specifically addresses this relationship between historical narratives and identities. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah, so this Victorian dress, what I was doing with this work was a few different things. One was pointing to African hairstyles, braiding and cornrows, which I was always taught was a symbol of pride in my African heritage. Using that and juxtaposing it with something that is considered finely crafted and fine fashion is this Victorian dress. So when we go to museums and we see dresses like this, or we're watching costume dramas, it's like, oh, European culture is so beautiful. That's the feeling I think that we're intended to get from it. And I do think those things are beautiful, but I also wanted to show these African braiding styles as something, a beautiful craft in its own right. And also, there's also the reference to slavery, because there was on the floor around it, you see these natural cotton bolls. They're like the buds of the cotton plant. And in some of those, I wish I'd included a close-up, but in some of those, I've taken the cotton out of the husk and actually glued some of my own curly hair into it. And so this is talking about African American or North American African identity as being, it's almost like our identities are growing out of those cotton fields, just because that story of slavery is told as the reason that we're here. And it is, but it's also obscuring the thousands of years of African culture that came before it. And so we're always associated with this period of pain and oppression. And so that's what I was getting at when I said in my statement that it's an uncomfortable identity to wear. And I am proud of our history, but it's also not a comfortable thing to always be associated with that, and to not, like sometimes I wonder, when people look at me, what do they see? Do they assume that that's where my ancestors came from? And yeah, that's basically it in a nutshell.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for I was so interested in hearing a little bit more about that. So,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Thank you.
And you'll see some other images that address slavery more, much more directly, where I made steel collars and stuff.
Would you like me to switch to that
Yeah,
now?
sure, that would be good.
So we're getting ahead.
Go back one. Yeah, so this is a thick steel collar, and these are pieces that reference shackles that were used during slavery. And but they're also not shackles, because they're jewelry. They're things that you can take off, right? And so it's talking about wearing that identity in a way as adornment, and then also including some hair. This is these are some dreadlocks that friends gave me. And so talking about how that identity is always associated with us. We wear it proudly, but sometimes it would be a relief to take it off. So
Yeah, it's like an incredible burden to have this one part of history, out of this contemporary history as well, and this this more in the past as well, like you were stating. Sorry, the identity is growing out of the cotton fields, but also obscuring more of a historical narrative that's behind there, having that all kind of forced on a person at once, and have to think about the weight of that while just like while walking down the street and like thinking about what someone's thinking about you. So
Yeah.
it's an intense weight.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that with us. And I'll go back here to Kendall, and I have a question for you. Yeah. Ooh.
That dress is absolutely beautiful. Yeah, so gorgeous.
So Kendall, keeping up again in this conversation around choice.
Yes.
As a drag performer, choice in hair is like undoubtedly a major component of your art form. I'm eager to hear your perspective on how your lived experience impacts the choice of hair that you use and how the hair that you use embodies your performance.
Okay. Yeah, I feel like going off of something that you were saying just about like growing up and identity, it kind of triggered something in me. And I just remember being mixed when I was younger. I actually like dyed my hair probably in like the 6th grade for the first time. I dyed it like, I like begged my mom to let me dye my hair blonde. And my hair is, curly and short now, but I dyed it so young because I think growing up, I instantly wanted to kind of feel like I was just one of something. I think being biracial, sometimes you often feel like you're not Black enough or white enough, and you sort of live in this like in-between world. And that's something that ignited in me from a very young age, literally in the 6th grade. And throughout, my teenage years with, queer identity and all this other sort of confusing stuff that was flowing through my veins, my racial identity was just something that I wanted to be simpler. So I think I gravitated towards a more European beauty standard, as a lot of us do. I even remember being like continuing dyeing my hair from like 18 to like my early 20s, like very, very, very blonde and et cetera, et cetera. The reason why I say this is because in my early 20s, when I started to get into drag, is really when, for some reason, it allowed me to express all sides of me. And I sort of started to look into performers and women that I really idolized, someone like Beyonce. And for me, these sort of women and the music that I gravitated towards and the sort of energy that I was so obsessed with allowed me to really feel, I don't know, more of a broad person. And I know it might sound a little bit wacky. Oh, I created a person or created a character to feel most like myself. But I really feel like that's sort of what happened. And for me, the style that I get to, dive into every single day, really, it's a huge spectrum of this person. And I really feel like it's a true representation of my racial identity, my history, and so many different things. And it's really cool that drag kind of allowed me to find that. And I think a lot of that comes from hair and aesthetics, right? Like it allowed me to, I don't know, present to the world in a different way that I kind of maybe suppressed when I was younger. In certain ways. So yeah, I feel like super empowered now. Like I always say that drag is like my armor. And I feel super empowered now in like all aspects of my life. And I think, yeah, it's I feel very lucky in that sense.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
Like the creating like a character is almost like created this honesty for yourself.
Totally.
In a way that you weren't able to have.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, it was the connection to the femininity. I think that's really what I was like grasping for, and didn't really know how to navigate it and understand it as a teenager or a kid. So I think that's really like a huge aspect of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you said also like hair like helps with the element, of course, with your artwork and with this element of femininity and, and characters. Do you find that it can change like depending on the hair that you choose can change like your entire performance for that day?
Oh, 100%. I have like my my like bad girl wigs. I have my like innocent girl wigs. Like we switch it up, and I feel like a lot of that has to do with like the music and performance as well. So depending on like what song I'm doing or what the vibe is, I definitely switch up the hair in that sense. Yeah.
Interesting.
It's like a different uniform or a different job, kind of.
That's so interesting, and
Yeah.
I feel like I want to bring up. I know it's kind of off script here, but going back, like you said, doing drag allowed you to express like all sides of you, and I'm wondering for the both of you, is your artistic practice kind of allowed for that same thing to be expressive of more sides of you? Like I know in regards to your show in the Penticton Art Gallery, which shout out to my hometown and a few people watching today. Or like we're going to talk about more about your unpublished practice coming up later. Do you find that same kind of experience with both of you, or different?
Yeah, for me, it's less about.
Oh, sorry. Stolen.
For me, it's less about presenting a part of me that was suppressed, but it's more about being able to talk about things, like being able to learn why I feel the way I do about certain things, connecting that history and racial identity to how I am in the world. And it's allowed me actually to connect with people about that. Whereas being only one of a handful of Black kids or biracial kids in my white neighborhood growing up, I often felt like I couldn't connect with people about those things. And now that I've been creating artwork about it. I have this amazing network of not just other Black artists across Canada that I can communicate with, and it's like a community. But also feeling like even just with people of any race, I feel like I've been able to express myself and have them understand where I'm coming from and everything. So yeah, so that's been a really good feeling.
Yeah, I kind of feel quite similar to Karin here. More than sharing the part of myself that were suppressed, I think more than that, it was talking about the oppression that was imposed on me, and just through art finding the roots of the identity crisis that I've been going through because of the oppression, and kind of trying to heal them through talking about it and sharing it with others. And one thing that is really important to me is mutual trauma, because it's like there are a lot of things that people may not talk about, but like once you talk about it, you see that there are other people who've been going through the same thing, but because it's not talked about, it's not shared, and it's not heard, and it's not healed. So I think through my artwork, that has been one of my main goals, to address the issues, or like why I feel the way I feel, like more like addressing the oppression that was imposed on me, but also like, yeah, with my scoliosis project, I think it was like part of me that I was uncomfortable to see. I was able to see differently through my art, like something that I used to think that is like hideous, I found beautiful after looking at it differently through the lens of art.
Thank you. That's oh gosh, I've
Oh,
got
sorry, you have one.
double mic'd, all eyes on me. So actually, I'm going to pass this back to Karin because you had brought up community, which kind of segues me perfectly into my next question that I have on my list. So thank you. So you actually mentioned in other interviews that when people find out about the use of hair in your practice, many often become eager to donate their hair to you. So how has this impacted your practice, and what are some of the reasonings that you have received from these individuals regarding their willingness to participate in such a way? And I'm going to go to, sorry, Kendall. Were these donated?
Yeah.
here? Okay.
Yeah,
So I'll go here.
so when I was doing my MFA at NASCAD in Halifax, this was when all these people were giving me their hair. And at that point, I still wasn't really sure what I wanted to create. I spent my first year of my MFA doing academic research and writing a big essay about Black women and femininity. And so I was like, had all this hair in my studio and I was doing all these experiments, and it was really frustrating because I didn't really know what it was going to be. And, but also it was a bit difficult because I knew that if I used the hair of people I knew in my work, it would become about those people. Like it's not anonymous to me anymore. It's not just a material I'm working with, it's that person. So then when I went back for my second year of my MFA, I had all this hair and I was still doing all these experiments. And I was creating this work, which is about slavery and shackles. And there were several people who gave me their dreadlocks, like I mentioned. And for that, it actually fit to have this donated hair, because this work really was about us as diasporic Africans living in North America. And so it fit somehow that that this was contributing to like our identity. But then if you could go to the blonde pieces. Yeah. Oh, maybe to the wall pieces. Yeah. So then I also I had all this hair in my studio of different textures, different colors. And but I had bought this one package of platinum blonde human hair extensions, and I kept gravitating towards that. And it was kind of interesting to me because at first I rejected it. I said, oh, I can't be a Black artist and only do work that's like blonde hair. That's crazy, right? It seemed to be rejecting my pride and my heritage. But then I also thought, if I'm gravitating towards that, there's obviously a reason for it. And that's the conditioning of always being told as a child that, well, not being told, but the messages that we get, especially in the 70s, was that blonde hair was the ideal. It was the highest. And so for this, and also because I wanted to talk about the hair trade and the way that commodification, it basically anonymizes, like we don't know who this hair is from. It's just being created to perpetuate some sort of standard. And so for this work, it would have felt wrong to use hair from people that I know. It was like an anonymous, this is the blonde ideal, this is what we see all around us. And so, yeah, so there are different meanings based on like what kind of work I'm doing. So whether I use friends' hair or not is based on the concept that I'm working with.
That's so interesting. Like this, how like the medium, even if it's it's no longer attached to that person, it still is so personal that you cannot separate that
exactly,
aspect.
Yeah.
It becomes more than a medium. It has its own like spark of identity that comes along with it.
Yeah,
even the anonymous identity of this is so powerful.
Yeah, and it's so curious, like working with that hair and knowing that it kind of came from somebody's head and not knowing who she was or where she was, or like, was it all from one person? Or yeah, it was definitely interesting.
Yeah, like sounds it like intriguingly personal, like in a way that working with mediums like string, which would maybe be similar in such a way. It's just you don't have that experience.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's also interesting to hear the parallels with the blonde hair and like looking back on that.
Yeah.
Awesome. So thank you. I feel like after every question, I'm just like, thank you. Thank you all. This is amazing. So I actually have a question for the group now. And I think some of you have touched on it, but it might not be the first time. But do you remember the first time that you were made aware of your hair or that someone's hair had an impact on you? Does anyone? I've got this little guy can go to somebody too. But we could pass.
I think the first time, like, I'm not sure when I was made aware of my own hair, but like somebody's hair that had impacted me was my mom's, because my mom used to spend hours like doing her hair, and I was always so impressed. Like as a child, I would be like, wow, this takes so much time. And when I grow up, I'll be able to do that too. And going back to the rules and everything, it was kind of sad that she put, all this effort into hair and then had to cover it and go out and take off the scarf. You don't want to you just made your hair, you don't want to put something on it. I guess that's the first time, but um, again, by the rules of our government, you're kind of always made aware of your hair as a woman, because like on the street we actually have a morality police that is there to remind you that your hair is showing. So I guess for all Iranian women, we're always like being made aware of our hair in different situations, and sometimes just by random people on subways, it's like, oh, you have your hair showing.
Very interesting. Thank you. Yeah, this got two mics. I gotta hand one over. Yeah, that you so you remember, like, of course your mom's hair, but you've just always had to be aware of hair. It's just always been ingrained, this awareness. Yeah.
This is a very strange memory, so go with me on this journey, okay? But I remember being in the second grade, and as a kid in the 90s, I was obsessed with the Spice Girls, like I'm sure a lot of us were. And I wanted to be Victoria Beckham so bad. Some things have changed, some things haven't. And I remember trying so hard for picture day at school to like make my hair like hers, because she had that like really intense bang, but my hair is very curly, so like no matter what I did, it was not looking the way that I want. And I still to this day I have this picture. I have like crazy amounts of gel, but it's like really curly and like over one eye, kind of like an emo bang vibe. But I remember that was probably like one of the earliest memories that I have of like, I guess trying to adapt to something that like I liked, but then like I didn't have the like obviously skill or technique at the time to know how to do that. And like I guess it's the awareness that like my hair was different than what I was seeing in the media, I guess would be for that particular person. Yeah. Should have been Scary Spice. That would have been easier.
You should have started your wig collection.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
So yeah, the memory that is strongest for me is when I was about 8 years old. I grew up in Deep Cove, as I mentioned. It was mostly white, and there were these two biracial boys that lived on the next street over, and they had these black cousins of theirs, these 18-year-old girls who came up from LA, who were like so black, like they were just like embodiment of Black American culture. And they had these cornrows, and at the time it was really popular to have cornrows with beads on them. And my mom told me, even though it's my white mom, she told me she educated me the most about what was going on in Black culture, because she really followed it, and my dad was just like, I don't care. So she told me how this was an African hairstyle, and people were wearing it in Black America as to embrace the pride in their African culture. And so she invited these two girls to come over and braid my hair and my twin sister's hair. And I remember it was actually really painful, because it took like 4 or 5 hours, and we were just sitting there and they were pulling really hard to get these nice tight braids. And so first of all, it was a memory of like several hours of pain. And then and then when I went to school with it, we got lots of attention. It was like everyone wanted to touch the braids and know what they were like. And But then also at that time, because it was 1980, there was this blonde, blue-eyed model named Bo Derek. There had just been a movie where she was wearing that hairstyle. So we showed up at school with this African hairstyle, and all the kids were teasing us, going, "Oh, you're trying to be Bo Derek." And which is like this really strange reversal of what was going on at the time.
Wow.
And but yeah, it was definitely a formative experience, because it was also that thing about pride but also discomfort, because I was, my mom like encouraged us to wear this hairstyle as a form of pride, but at the same time it increased our difference from the other kids, so it was really uncomfortable. But yeah, I mean, it was, I don't regret that experience, because it was formative, and yeah, it was a very interesting experience.
It's interesting, like how like potent those like early memories can be. Like mine, I remember my first memory of hair was actually my dad had really, really long hair.
Wow.
My dad was like a grunge guy. Yeah. So, and he had a goatee and everything. And I was like maybe like 3, and my dad had to he got a job that required him to like cut his hair and shave his beard. And I just like remember, I was this early childhood memory of my dad walking out of the bathroom, and I just was like, "That's not my dad."
Oh my gosh,
Just
yeah.
like, so it's like, it's crazy the way that like hair is just such a marker of identity. Like even like earliest like young versions of us, or like use that to tie to like our mothers, to tie to familiarity and things that we know. So awesome. So continuing on, I'd actually love to hand this second microphone to somebody. I'll give it to you, Saghi. Actually, perfect. You're the next question. So I'd love to bring up the topic of femininity and feminism in your work, something that's come up a little bit in this conversation so far. So I know that the term femininity is kind of hard to pin down. It can be a source of power or a source of pain. To some of us, it might mean like the world, and to others it might not really mean anything. So it's something that we all have a personal connection to in our own feelings towards. So I'd like to talk a little bit more on that. So Saghi, in a statement about your most recent unpublished series called My Femininity Grows, you wrote that you are, quote, making amends with your femininity after years of detesting it, living under the oppression of the regime of Iran. I'd love to hear more about what that entails for you, and how your practice, and if there are ways in which hair plays into that consideration. And I'll pop in another one of your images here.
Sure.
Oh, going wrong way. Okay, gotta keep going this way.
Yeah, to be very honest, this is still an ongoing journey for me. I'm still trying to find my personal form of femininity, apart from the societal norms around what's feminine and what's not. But kind of going back to why I hated my femininity, well, kind of for the same reasons that I explained. Like, you tell a 9-year-old girl that you have to cover your body, your hair, like women are heavily oppressed, like you don't have even like bodily autonomy because you're told what to wear and what not to wear. So there were times that I actually wish that I was born a man, living in Iran, because of the oppression that was towards women and the gender inequality that was just so strong in our society, all because of these rules that were opposed to us. I think big part of it was unconscious, because it was years and years of facing so many challenges that men don't face just because of being a woman. And to the point that I was frustrated with my identity and with my femininity, and I didn't want it anymore. I was like, okay, I'm done with this. I'm tired of this. This is just like, I want to be a man, so the world would be a better place for me, or like easier place to live in. And then when I came to Canada, I was treated differently. Well, I was able to dress however I want, and as a queer human being, I was more accepted. I didn't have to hide my identity. I didn't have to commit to societal norms. I still believe that societal norms around genders and femininity still exist everywhere. But some places in the world is just less than the other places. And I'm glad that in like Canada, I feel more comfortable. And then like I was slowly trying to make amends with my like femininity, and also being more comfortable with my queer identity, because like again in my country you can get a death sentence if you're queer, so obviously no one wants to express it. And then the women life freedom movement started happening in Iran, and I saw all these women just raising their voices for their rights and standing up. And I think it kind of changed the meaning or how I looked at femininity, because femininity unconsciously for me was like the weaker uh, humans, like humans with less rights, humans that are oppressed. But then I was seeing that, oh no, these are like heroes. These are people who are strong enough to stand up for their rights. I slowly was like, oh, I'm actually so proud to be a woman, and I want to embrace it. But to this date, I'm still struggling to find my own femme and see like what kind of femininity, like feminine, like mostly not more like what I wear, how my styles. I'm still trying to find it in my style, because I feel like it's so tied into the gender societal norms that like, oh, skirts, dresses. But like I think femininity is more than just skirts and dresses, and I'm trying to praise that and find that through my personal work in like style, and then also trying different things with my artworks. I'm also using some hair, some old dresses that I feel like that, you know, there were type of dresses that were forced on me to wear to show that I'm a girl. And today I don't want to wear those dresses anymore, because I can show that I'm a woman in other attire as well.
Yeah, that's such a like so like you like it's such a situation that's unique to you and what you're going through, but also such like I feel like I can deeply feel some of the things that you're talking about, and like this trying to like reestablish or like understand, like based on what's been imposed on you, these ideas of femininity, and like you said, like weakness, or like the weaker sex is like, I mean, how many times have we all heard this, even growing up in different parts of the world? Like I that's something I'm trying to understand for myself. It's been a years long experience for myself too, and I'm sure we all have.
Well, it's been going on for
Yeah.
such a long time, you know. This
Yeah.
inequalities existed for a long time, and it's not just like for women in Iran. Yes, it's more extreme in Iran than in some other countries, but I'm sure a lot of people are going through that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, it's very important to acknowledge that this is about all human beings who identify as female or women, because they all face all those like societal norms.
Totally, and especially when you involve the queer experience too.
Yes.
Yeah, which is another element on on top. So thank you for that very thoughtful response.
For sure.
And I'll give you a chance, just if you would like to, before we move on, in the same vein of conversation, but before we move on, if you wanted to say anything about this work of art that we have up.
Yeah, this was actually like very connected to this work is called Unveiling Their Power. It was an ode to all brave Iranian women who stood up for their rights. Like growing from a menstruation pad is like some live sprouts. That was um like how I envisioned like hope growing, like out of everything that has been oppressed, and like it's just hope growing. And the mountains, the photos that you can see, it's our mountaintop in Iran called Damovand. It is the highest mountaintop, and in our culture and literature is a symbol of resilience, so that's why it's there. And also the sprouts kind of look like body hair, so it's like also a reminder that like body hair is natural and is okay to have it, and like stop telling women what to do with their body hair.
Okay. Great. Thank you for explaining that. Thank you. I'll take this. You're up next, Kendall. So, your name itself is a call to the performativity of gender, and the idea of gender is a construct, merging pop culture references and wordplay such as Kendall and Kendall Jenner, a member of the Kardashian family, with the last name Gender. So I'd love to know, what does femininity mean to you, and what role does hair play in that for you?
Yeah, so just a little like explanation, I guess, of the name. Out of drag, my name is Kenneth, as I mentioned before. So Kendall is actually a nickname that I've had for like a lot of my adolescence and kind of growing up. So when I started drag, I was like, oh, Kendall, Kendall, it all kind of like worked, obviously. And back in 2014, I had a slightly different opinion of the Kardashians than maybe I do today, but I really do believe that it is a play on words, obviously, and it's really based around the idea that gender is a construct, at least in my world, and not that I'm the number one fan of Kendall Jenner. I don't run a Kendall Jenner fan page or anything like that, but it's almost in some sense kind of poking fun at those sort of like ideologies, and to be honest, kind of them as a family, really, because I think a lot of pop culture in the last couple of years we've seen around their idea of femininity and their idea of body types and all that kind of stuff. It's an interesting conversation, to say the least. So I kind of take it in a little bit more of a kind of a poking fun way in that sense. But yeah.
Switch through images at all?
Oh yes, there's me in a beautiful red dress. Actually, interesting for that. So basically, this was one of the runways on Canada's Drag Race, where we got to dress up as a person in pop culture within the Canadian sphere. And I chose Stacey McKenzie, who was a model, and she was a judge actually on Canada's Drag Race for season 1. And it was interesting, when this episode came out, I actually got a lot of flack, if I can be honest with you, for the representation, and just the sort of like style of hair that I chose, and all of that kind of stuff. And although yes, I am biracial, I think it's an interesting thing sometimes, especially in the drag sphere, is you're not always perceived the race that you are, because of certain times of year, the foundation changes, obviously cameras, lighting, and I'm also painting on a really heavy face, obviously. So you're sometimes perceived in a different way. So I actually got a lot of, I think the best word is flack for the specific runway, because people didn't see me at all as biracial, so they didn't think it was appropriate that I would, represent a biracial or lighter skinned Black person. But I stand by my choice. In this sense, it was done in a very respectful way, and it was an interesting conversation to have online, and I tried my best to be a part of the conversation, because I understand, obviously, the ideas of colorism and all of this kind of stuff that comes with a racial identity. But I believe that always what I do when it comes to imagery and representation always does come from a really respectful place. At least I try my hardest to do that. So yeah, that was actually an interesting picture choice and kind of part of my drag career, because it sort of what's the best way to say this? It sort of taught me some things about how I present in such a public sphere. And it made me a little bit more cautious in a way of just being respectful, making sure that, I am understood in what I'm doing, and, people want to take the time to know that I'm respectful, I guess is the best way to sort of to say that. Yeah, it was an interesting journey. Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah, I chose that. I tried to choose a couple different images of you in drag that really just, because I know your mixed race identity, and that just pull from completely different aspects and areas.
Yeah.
I thought that very interesting, like juxtaposed against this work here, where you look like a Victoria's Secret angel.
Yes, very that. Yes, a beautiful angel.
Yeah.
Yes.
With the, like, Giselle Bundchen or whatever, like.
Oh, I'll take it. I've been called much worse things than Giselle Bundchen.
And then I was also just wondering, because you're coming from a slightly different background, where, like you were talking earlier about doing drag, you're able to kind of like open up more aspects of yourself and find more honesty, and how that necessarily, like how that relates to femininity and the way that you see that is where we've maybe seen like it as a weakness and have to overcome. I'm just, I'd love to hear about your.
I think right away when I was born, I came out a little bit more flamboyant than the next person. And I was lucky to be born in a household that was very supportive of that. My mom was always very supportive of my individuality and my expression and that kind of stuff. And it didn't really come into my life until I got in a little bit more of a public area, like school, where I really realized, oh, I'm a little bit different than everyone else. And it's kind of interesting, not to say that I was sheltered, but you don't really realize your differences until you're put in a situation where there's a lot of different people. So right when I got into school, that was always something that I kind of wanted to like hide from, even though it came so naturally to me. That sort of, flamboyancy and femininity, if you will. It was something that it runs through my veins every single day. I can't help it, no matter how hard I tried when I was younger. And yeah, for me, femininity and that sort of energy is something that I've always idolized. People, women in my family, my mom in specific, and they're always like I view them just as the most strong. And I don't identify as a woman myself, but I respect women, I love women, and I think I can be a feminist without being a woman.
Yeah.
And I think that I can embrace the idea of femininity for me. I mean, obviously, yes, we were talking about, different outfits and that kind of stuff. This is just my own personal expression of femininity. But I think it's empowering to play with it, because I view a lot of strength in females. Yeah.
That's super. Yeah. Thank you so much. That's super interesting. Yeah. I mean, that and the idea of that, it's something kind of like hiding from it, running from it, but also that you see so much power, and I think is
and it
so
was
relatable.
When I first started drag, it was very interesting. The first time I got into full drag and I went out, it was almost like a switch change, and I was perceived by the world in a completely different way. Not that I would say I was perceived as a woman, but I was perceived in this idea of femininity that was completely different, and maybe not something that I had really understood prior to doing that fuller presentation. And I think it made me more, it made me more appreciative and found more even respect within femininity in general. Yeah.
Thank you. And then I've got one for Karin too, before we go into a couple group questions. I'm just checking the time. Awesome. Okay, so Karin. So I'm gonna pop over to some of your images here. We've got more of the jewelry. Maybe I'll bring it over to something more. Oh yeah, fantastic, by the way. I had to figure it out.
I'm here for compliments.
Perfect. So from jewelry to replicas of more historically women's fashion, your work draws on visual symbols assigned with femininity. Can you speak more about the importance of femininity or feminism in your work?
I think I didn't think deeply enough about this one.
That's okay. If you would like to not, you can also just talk about this work.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah, no, I guess when I wrote that long essay during the first year of my master's degree, it was about Black women and femininity, and it was basically looking back at historical constructions of femininity and how Black women never seem to fit into that that stereotype of femininity. So like right away when I looked up femininity on Wikipedia, it said right there, in Western cultures, femininity is characterized by fair skin and long flowing hair. Right? So right there, you just see, okay, so how do Black women fit into that? And so that idea of what femininity is, that was what I kept coming back to, why Black women were still rejecting their natural hair textures, and I think that was like the thing that, because I was a child in the 70s and I was aware of people reclaiming their hair through afros and cornrows and stuff. And so it just really was a big question to me. Like, it was like, okay, well, if I thought that we had, reclaimed that many, many years ago, and so why are so many women still wearing straight hair extensions? And so in this essay, through all of this historical research and then reading different things, like Bell Hooks there was a quote where she said, Black women in pop culture get to play two roles, the mammy or the Black bitch, the crazy Black bitch. And so then I was using that and thinking about how in Western culture, the trichotomy of the virgin, the whore, and the mother. So in that essay, I theorized that in our culture, Black women only get to play the whore or the mother. They don't get to play the virgin. And so then, and using like all these packages of human hair that you buy, sometimes it says 100% virgin human hair. And so that was a clue to me. I just felt like, and my essay was called Incomplete Selves, because I was talking about how we use this hair to complete ourselves, to feel like we can have all three of those things within us that we've been denied by history and by pop culture. Yeah, so and those things aren't, I don't think they're specifically addressed in my work, but definitely that's what informs a lot of what I've done in the last 10 years or 15 years.
Beautiful, thank you. I wasn't really prepared for that question. Answers it so eloquently, just like
I know. And then I was like, oh wait, I spent a year thinking about this. I should be able to like talk about it.
True professional.
Yeah. Anyway, I was going to talk about how I went to a male barber shop this morning to get my hair trimmed because that's a whole other story. Like, it's just, for me, it's fun to go into male spaces like that, and it's a different experience than going into a female beauty salon. So,
Well, looks great.
yeah,
It does look really great. I had a similar experience. I had a buzz cut for several years.
Oh, really?
Like really short hair buzz cut. And yeah, that like kind of like navigating the world between like salons and barbers, and like kind of feeling out of place at both, but also very interested at both.
Yeah, and knowing that men pay half the price for this haircut that women do going to a salon.
Do they give you the hot towel too? Have you ever
No,
had the hot
I
towel
never had that,
experience?
unfortunately. But I did once have a guy, when he was shaving like the back, I had him like go shave like right down my back, and I was like, I don't. Maybe most of your customers need that, but I don't.
Then you get the ingrowns coming back. Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you.
Okay.
Before I side note even more, I have a couple group questions before we open it on up to questions from our audiences. So, where's my? Oh, I've got my mic here. I'm like, where is it? So, group question. When people engage with your work or activism, what reactions or insights do you hope that they take away regarding hair's role in identity and empowerment? This microphone.
I guess for me, I just want people to think about it, like to be aware of it, like to not just take for granted that hair is just a choice. Oh, I feel like doing my hair this way today, or I feel like doing this hairstyle. I just want people to be aware of all the meanings that are woven into that, and how they're reflected in different cultures and different genders and different spheres.
Sorry, my hair, my dog's hair.
Speaking of hair.
I thought that was my dog's hair.
Yeah, I think like personally, in general, as an artist, like every time I want to present my work, it's always a question of, oh, what would people think? What if they don't see it the way that I see it? What if they don't understand like what I want to say? But like for my work that like are addressing like societal issues, like such as my work for women life freedom, my biggest hope was to be an advocate, like kind of raise awareness. I think raising awareness has been my main goal, because media, and especially Western media, does not like cover what's going on in Iran fully, or sometimes unfortunately it's biased. I want the truth to be out there, and I feel like art is a great way for people to engage with that piece of news. But also what I would like definitely as an artist, I invite everyone's perspective and different interpretations of my work. It's always welcome and very interesting to me. But I do want people to think about like what's going on, and I'm hoping that there's some extra information or education or awareness that they take away after like seeing the work, or at least thinking about, oh, there are women in other countries that don't have bodily autonomy, or can't simply like show their hair. And yeah, also kind of like addressing the privilege of freedom that not everyone has. So these are the things that I hope the audience take away after seeing my work.
I saw that for just a sec. And in case anybody is interested, there's specifically a YouTube video that I was able to watch. It's like an hour and a half long. You'll have to say the name of your YouTube channel that it's posted on, but it's on specifically you talking on activism in regards to the Women Life Freedom movement at Capilano University. And you recommend a bunch of amazing artists at the end as well, and it's a very informative talk. So if anybody's interested in learning a little bit more and hearing more of Saghi's activism, what's your
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's under my name, Saghi Ehteshamzadeh. Like the spelling is on CICA's posting. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. And Kendall.
Yeah, I suppose right now, I think drag is often misunderstood by a lot of people, especially like in the social climate that we're in. And I just think that even if you don't 100% understand drag or what it is that I do or anything along those lines, I think it's important to remember that there is a line of similarity within all of us. I think all of us have a tiny little aspect of drag that we implement in our lives, even if you don't notice it. I think, putting on a specific shirt, going to work is a tiny bit of drag. Maybe choosing a beautiful red lip today was a little bit of drag. I think we all have that tiny little aspect of things that we do, maybe in the specific context of an aesthetic sense that make us feel a little bit different or confident. This is my drag, obviously, but I really believe that all of us have that sort of within ourselves, and I think that tuning into that will make you, I don't know, just feel a little bit more equal when you're, looking at a drag performer or watching a show or whatever that is, and maybe doesn't seem like such a far off concept that's so, outside of your everyday life.
Thank you
Yeah.
for drawing attention to the ways that we curate our own identities, like
Yeah.
everybody does
Yeah,
every
absolutely.
day, to try and really even the playing field. Wonderful. And one more question before I open it up to eager individuals who didn't, like me, get to spend like 3 weeks like writing and rewriting and crossing out questions. So are there any artists that use hair in their practices, other than, of course, Posh Spice, that whatever they may be, that have had a significant influence on you and your artwork, and that you would recommend to us? Of course, everybody should listen to the Spice Girls, though.
Yeah, so I was thinking about this question and thinking about how the hair itself led me into the work that I'm doing. So there weren't actual specific artists working with hair that influenced my work because it sort of developed naturally. But there are a couple of people, other Black artists that whose work I really respect, like Sonia Clark in the US, and there's a newer, more emerging artist in the jewelry world named Jay Diamond, who's done some interesting work with hair extensions and stuff. And also, I would like to recommend a video by a singer from the 1980s named Miss Julie Brown. And she has a song called "'Cause I'm a Blonde," and it was in the movie Earth Girls Are Easy. And it is hilarious. Like, if you look it up on YouTube, she's talking about why blondes have an easier life. And things like, because I'm blonde, I don't have to think. I talk like a baby and I never pay for drinks. And, and it's basically about, it's not about blondes actually being dumb. It's about this form of privilege because they are so at the top of that European beauty ideal that men do everything for them. They don't need to learn to read or cook or anything like that. It's just quite a hilarious video, so I urge you to look it up.
Adding that to the rotation.
I just have one artist in mind, Hoda Zarbov. She was an Iranian artist. Her work was displayed at AGO a couple years ago. She also did talk about identity in her work a lot, and she had a couple of installation pieces that had hair. So I encourage you to look her up.
Thank you.
I'm going to say a very underground artist that I'm sure not a lot of you have heard of. Her name is Beyonce.
So, could you spell
Yeah,
that?
B-E. Yeah, I mean, Beyonce is so known for her like hairography, and I think as a performer, that's like another extension of her. Yeah, I think like, you know, a few years back when she sort of created this like lemonade project that really dove into her like racial identity. I think it was probably one of the first times in like her career that she almost like rejected from what her label wanted her to look like and what her label sort of wanted her to do, and she really created art that was like based around, you know, how she was feeling and the climate that she was in, obviously wearing a lot of traditional hairstyles and all of that kind of stuff, but yeah, I feel like Beyonce and her hair, there's two people on that stage all the time.
Thank you. And then let's see here. We've got like a little bit of time here, but well, not much. But Karin, did you want to talk about your current practice a little bit, or because I don't think you got to mention anything about this artwork?
Yeah, so part of the reason I created this work was that the black dress was created for the ROM, and it's actually part of their permanent collection. And they had promised me that it would be able to travel and go to other institutions to be shown across Canada. In reality, their conservation department doesn't want to let it go very often. So it was shown here at Burnaby Art Gallery back in February, which was really great, but they don't, it's been requested by museums several times in the last couple of years, and they almost always say no. So I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm gonna make another one. And this one is actually based on Queen Victoria's wedding dress, and it's also using synthetic hair extensions. Some of them, I don't have a good close-up of it because this opened in Edmonton last month, and I wasn't there, unfortunately. But so I have a lot of it is braided hair extensions. There are different dreadlocks. Like since I made that piece for the ROM 10 years ago, there's just been this explosion of when you go into Black community supply stores, they're just all these different textures and colors of hair on the wall of synthetics that you can buy. There are dreadlocks, there's curly hair, there's like all these different types. So for this dress, I wanted to do it in blonde because I think often Queen Victoria's wedding dress is cited as the first example of a white wedding dress that started the whole trend of women wearing white. And and associating that whiteness with virginity. Same with blondness is often associated with youth and virginity. And so I wanted to bring all of those elements together and also just show that this work is less about, whereas that last one was very specifically about Black identity, this is really talking about like the hybridity and the way that all of these things interplay with each other.
Awesome. Thank you. And that leaves time for us to open up to questions. So, Thea, if I could get you kind of monitoring the questions on the computer up front, if that's okay. And then, yeah, if anybody has questions, maybe I'll give one to Lauren. You can be our mic lady, and we'll keep one up here for whoever has. Does anybody in the audience have questions? Okay, you bet.
Thanks so much for the panel. It was such an interesting talk, and I really enjoyed seeing all your artwork. It was incredible. I have a question for Kendall. You were talking about, how you being in drag really opened up these sort of avenues that maybe you hadn't explored before, some of your creativity that you were able to sort of pursue and follow through. And I'm just wondering, did being in drag, did it also help, was it also an avenue for you to sort of connect or discover more about your culture, about your biracial culture?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's so much of the like Kendall character that came from like the strength of Black women. And I think that growing up for me, I never really got to dive into, the specific braided hairstyles and, these kind of things because I just didn't necessarily have that like full texture of hair or really that like full experience as a little boy. So for me, when I got into drag and I started, learning from other Black queens and being around them, and I got to really dive into that part of my identity that I only viewed as a bystander, I suppose, in some aspects, and then really got to show my appreciation and learn a lot about it. And I think that was the kind of cool thing, is that it became a sort of like education system for me, learning about all of these different things, because I find it so beautiful, and I really love that I get to participate in it in a small way. Yeah.
Any questions from the online peanut gallery? No, not yet. Okay. Anybody else in the audience have any questions? Yeah, Zia in the back.
Thank you. Actually, so during the talk, I've been constantly thinking that you've all kind of have, actually a question to the group that you've all mentioning that hair has been sometimes it's acting as a restraint, sometimes it acts as empowerment. So I'm wondering if you can, if we're willing to talk more about how you kind of investigate this duality of notion in your work, and how has that been influencing your work?
You wanna tackle this one first? Okay. All right.
Yeah, I think I sort of mentioned before that I use drag as an armor of sense, but I think that question's interesting because there is also the dichotomy or the other side of it, that it can be, I don't know if I want to use the word dangerous, but it can be a scary place sometimes, with the presentation that I put on, in certain ways. So, yes, obviously in certain environments, I'm very embraced and I feel very powerful within this sort of like feminine presentation. But there's also a lot of environments that I don't feel comfortable in and I don't feel safe in, presenting this way. I think in a queer experience, I think we learn, the best way to describe it is sort of like the idea of masking. We learn at a very young age that, depending on the sort of environment that we're in, we might butch up a little bit or lower our voice or, wear a baseball hat or whatever that sort of situation looks like. And it's interesting often because in drag, especially, I don't necessarily always get that opportunity. I sort of am, oh, hello. Good day, everyone. I don't always necessarily get that opportunity to mask in the same way, because I'm obviously so eccentric in the presentation. So it's an interesting navigation often, in between the masculine and feminine energies.
Anyone else want to address?
Yeah, I think in my work, again, I mostly went to like, especially with the collection that I made for Women Life Freedom, I was mostly focused on how empowered all these women who are standing up for their rights are, and like um, part of it was actually find out part of this standing up has been by showing their hair. Actually, like civil disobedience is something that like women has been contributing to throughout the past year, because like when protesting didn't work and there were a lot of people being murdered by the regime, they had to protest another way, and one of the ways was just simply not wearing the hijab and showing their hair. And I find that really, really powerful. And I feel like it's a beautiful act of resilience. And it is very, very dangerous for them to do this, yet they do it. And another thing that happened when the women life freedom movement started was other women cutting their hair, piece of their hair, as an act of solidarity. But other women, this is a very traditional and old tradition in Kurdistan, one of the provinces in Iran. So yeah, I think that kind of also went viral internationally. A lot of like famous non-Iranian celebrities started cutting a piece of their hair, and then eventually, I think there was a show. I cannot remember where, but there was an art show that had this big art piece with um, hair, like bits of hair from women from around the world who had sent their hair for this show as an act of solidarity to stand with Iranian women. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess with some more words on my relationship to hair and femininity. I think when I was growing up, I had the opposite experience of Kendall. Like you said, that you always saw women with like their hair and their beauty as being symbols of strength. And maybe because I'm older and the feminism that I grew up with was all about rejecting that and feeling like being, because my parents were feminists, and my mom would sometimes put on a bit of lipstick, but usually her hair was a bit shorter, and we got the message that hair and makeup were something that was really frivolous and not to be taken seriously. So even though like in my 20s I had long hair, and if I went out I would put makeup on, when I turned 40 I got a really short haircut, and it was really this decision. Like, I didn't want to be seen as a pretty girl anymore. I wanted to be seen as a powerful woman. And I mean, it's kind of sad that we can't see women with whatever hairstyle and however they present themselves, that I somehow have a hard time seeing that as a symbol of power. And also, yeah, even just like the clothes that we put on, like these jackets, although yours is quite feminine because it's Chanel inspired, but they're like suits, right? Like, we're putting on suits to be taken seriously, and that's something that was generally a male outfit. So I think it's still there. I do think that nowadays people are way more, like people are talking about things like vocal fry or like baby voice, that why should we have to like talk in a deeper, more male voice to be taken seriously? Like, why can't all of those elements of femininity be respected? So yeah, that's yeah.
Thank you. It's so interesting, like being able to be here and see just the multiplicity of experiences, and like how in some ways all of us are experiencing things like so similarly, and then like some of us are, it's just the complete opposite, and like we're all in a process of navigating through this weird, I'm trying to think of a word that isn't fucked up, but like like experience of hair and femininity and identity and agency, and it just like really is like cross cultural and yeah, like it's a universal kind of this experience, but so at the same time so personal, and so yeah, it's just it's so interesting. I feel like I'm gonna be like playing all of these questions and answers through my mind and making connections like throughout for quite a long time. So thank you. Do we have any online questions?
Yeah, there's one.
Okay.
So Selena Liz, she's asking, what is the most powerful they have ever felt in their hair and why?
Oh, good question. Does anybody want to field that Or, well, you think I can start with me, but I felt the most powerful in my hair when I had none, when I shaved it all down to the scalp. And I feel more powerful in having hair now after experiencing that, like just with my own, like kind of figuring out, I mean, being in art school and figuring out my identity coming out of a small town and my queer identity and who I was as a person. For me, it was when it was gone that I could start kind of changing and seeing how people treated me differently as well, is when I felt the most powerful. Yeah.
It's probably the opposite. Yeah, I mean, I guess like I said, the idea of femininity that I present obviously is I love long hair, and I feel very powerful when I have like a 36-inch wig on, and there's a fan right in the center of the stage, blowing ever so softly on either side. That's when I feel like a bad bitch.
That sounds powerful. Like I feel the power like emanating from you as you describe that.
I do carry a fence. I didn't think it was appropriate today, but probably I would
I don't really know when specifically I felt like really strong because of my hair, but it's so interesting now that I just think about it and about like the blonde standard beauty. I've like being a bit younger, I had this big urge to bleach my hair and make it the perfect white ice blonde, which I could never achieve because it's my genes and like it can't turn that white. It doesn't happen. But I tried so hard. Once I spent 13 hours in a beauty salon. 13 to the point that my dad was really worried that like, are you really at the salon? And I was like, I swear I'm still here. I still had hair on. And I was really happy. Like I came out like it wasn't still icy blonde, but it was still blonde. And I think that was when I felt super happy with my hair. And I think people showed different interest in that. I think I got more interest in my style because I had blonde hair, because, again, the norms and the standards. But yeah, now thinking about it, it's kind of like think about what you shared. It's very interesting how the blonde is really specific. Also, how you wanted to have blonde hair in sixth grade.
Yeah, I have an experience of dyeing my hair blonde too. Like I had a really short pixie haircut for a while, and yeah, and I've dyed that blonde a couple of times, and same kind of thing. Like I went to a really cheap hair salon, and then it was this really brassy color, and then I had to go to a nicer hair salon so they could actually treat it properly, and then it really was like a platinum blonde. And yeah, and it's like I'm not sure that that's my most powerful, but it was well, I guess it was most powerful because it felt the most transformative, right? Like it felt like it was completely different from what I normally see my identity as being. And then again, like I feel like I could, because I teach at VCC in the jewelry program, and I always felt like the two times that I did that was like in the summer when I wasn't around my students. And again, because I felt like I wouldn't be taken seriously with that blonde hair, which I don't think that's true, but it just seemed like something fun that I was going to do for myself. And yeah, it's kind of a weird relationship. And then also because of critiquing that, like, why should we have to be blonde to feel beautiful? Then it makes me feel like I can't do that all the time, even though I think it's fun. I feel like it would be going against what I'm trying to say. And that's really messed up too, right? Like, why shouldn't I be able to just like put on whatever identity I want and not feel guilty about it? So, yeah.
Yeah, like this sense of like having to be like very true in everything you do to like this specific idea that you hold, and maybe like not having the freedom to have space for both. I do think another interesting thing was the connection that in all of our stories had with transformation and with the power of using hair as a transformative thing, and the power that comes from that. So that was kind of interesting. Although all stories were different, there was that power and transformation. Wonderful. I'm just checking. I've been having some vibrations, making sure it's not people texting me questions. Okay. Were there any other questions from the group or from the online? Awesome. Okay. Well, on that note, thank you all for coming here. And well, actually, you know what I didn't even think about? Did any of you did any of you have questions for each other? Like, did you, or you feel like this is like good? Your questions have been asked. Oh yeah. Okay.
No, I guess I just wanted to say to you, Saghi, like I can't even imagine what that would be like to live in such an oppressive place that, like, obviously your relationship to hair is like a whole other level, right? Like, we're just, it's like, oh, how do I want to present myself today and what does it say about me? But yeah, like, I really obviously like hope that people in your homeland that it's going to get better for them soon. Like, that is just so, yeah, it's just really, I don't know, it's just moving to think about what the protests that women are going through just to have their very basic rights. Like, it's yeah.
Thank you so much for acknowledging that. That is very heartwarming because it's like, especially in this day and age, a lot of times I felt a lack of empathy for what we're going through. Obviously, it's like very hard for people to even imagine that because it's like something they've never had to live through. But I really appreciate this being acknowledged and the empathy, and that's what my community needs. And like also just spreading the word, raising awareness. I'm so sad to say that today a 16-year-old girl has died in coma because she was again um, assaulted by the morality police because she was not wearing a headscarf in the subway. So it is still going on in 2023. Iranian women do not have bodily autonomy, very fundamental human rights. And yeah, it's just, I think it's important to talk about this stuff. Thank you for acknowledging this, and thank you for allowing me to share this on your platform. It's really, really important. Thanks.
I feel very grateful to have you here and to have the opportunity to hear you speak, and to be able to share your like what's going on in your country and in your life. And yeah, thank you seriously, and thank all of you. It's been just absolutely lovely to hear all of your perspectives, and hopefully, I mean, I know I've learned a lot from each and every one of you, and I'll be thinking about this and for like quite a while, and hopefully we'll have this stream saved and up and on our platform. So if you wanted to share it with anybody, we'll probably be sharing it with. We've got about 5,000 people on our email list that we may have already harassed at least 3 times or 4 times to participate. So thank you. And then once again, amazing YouTube. I'll send the link to everybody.
Thank you so much.
Of course, thank you. Did you have any?
No, thank you for having me. Thanks for hanging out with us. It's very beautiful sharing space with all and all of you.
And I guess on a final note, before we leave, we are a nonprofit organization. So yeah, if you would like to support us further, we really appreciate any and all donations. You can send them to us online, here in person. It helps us to be able to keep going with international exhibitions, but to also have these open conversations, to pay our artists fairly, which we will always do, and to keep these conversations going. So please, if you have the ability, we would love your support. Yeah. Thank you so much. Bye. Bye. Thank you all so much. Like.